Hi, my name is Cindy Porter and I'm a video designer for ColourArte. Today I'm going to share with you my flip and drag that I have done on a piece of MDF board that I will be turning into a clipboard when it's finished. Here you'll see me adding a very small amount of white flat acrylic paint, it's Global brand, just to the spot where I plan on doing my flip. I am now grabbing what I have mixed up of my colours to get them ready and grabbing an empty shot glass, little plastic throwaway shot glass, so that I can make up my flip cup. When you do a flip and drag, it's essential not to have too much coloured paint. Too much paint will take over and it'll just be like any normal flip. I always like to spray a small amount of silicone into my flip cup when I do a flip and drag. That's the first thing that goes in. Now I am adding some Global Cool Blue flat acrylic paint into the cup, just a very small amount, and followed that with some Guatemalan Green Primary Elements Art pigments, which has been mixed up in some vivid clear enamel and with water added, of course, to get the right consistency. Another little squirt of silicone along the way. Now I am grabbing the blue Bayou Primary Elements Art pigments, lovely blue colour, gorgeous rich blue colour. It actually looks deeper in real life than it does right here on the video at the moment. Next up here is Indian Copper Primary Elements. I decided a small touch of copper would be a really nice effect in the finished piece, so I'm hoping that that comes through and shows up nicely. Here I am adding a small touch of Go Navy Primary Elements. I thought a little bit of blue shimmer along with the flat blue would look really good, and a little more Guatemalan Green, one of my favourite colours. It's a beautiful tealy green colour. Tiny bit more in the cup there. I'm only putting a few drops of each colour in this shot glass. We only put on a very small amount of paint. I'm squirting in now some Kiwi Primary Elements Art pigments, gorgeous lime colour, giving that a tiny stir, and just about to flip it when I decide that I want a few more drops of the flat navy paint on the top. Just a couple of drops. You see there, just a couple of tiny little drops that I've added in. So now I'm just about ready to do my flip. One little scribble across the top of that navy that I put in, and it's time to flip. And there we go, flipped it over. So next we will add white flat Global paint that has been mixed up to consistency with some pouring medium and then water around the edge of that cup to keep it completely sealed onto the MDF board. So don't want anything leaking out while I'm spreading paint around. I'm using the stick to help quickly spread the paint roughly over the surface, and you'll see in a couple of minutes how I then pick everything up to let it flow and get a nice smooth finish on the surface instead of these rough lumps and bumps that are created by me roughly spreading the paint everywhere. This is just a quick way to get it roughly covered across the board. I've left this video in real time so you can see the whole process very clearly of how I go about doing this technique. Tipped out the last little bit out of the cup there just to cover up the rest of the surface. It's important to get enough paint onto the background, I find, to make this technique work well. Scraping out over a little bit there. Don't like to waste paint. I decided there's not quite enough on there, so I go to my go-to bottle. This is a pre-mixed bottle where I have already mixed in pouring medium and a little water to get it up to the right consistency. And I keep it that way so that I've always got some on hand. Okay, so now you can see I'm holding the cup hard against the board as I lift it to let the white flow and move. What I'm trying to do is get a nice even coat of white onto the background to make my base for my pour. I'm also running my fingers around the edge so that I get all the edges painted over as well, tapping out any little air bubbles that I see along the way. And if you notice there, I have to start being really careful now, because can you see the colour is starting to seep slightly out of the cup into the white paint already. So what I've actually done is press a little harder with my thumb, but it's a bit hard to notice that on the video. Okay, and here comes the drag. I twist the cup just slightly to break the suction seal and gently start to drag it across the top of the paint, just letting a little bit of paint out as I go. Isn't it an awesome technique? I first saw this technique done by a lady by the name of Anne Osborne, and I would have to say that she is probably the master of this technique. But it is one I certainly enjoy doing. What happens often when you do a drag like this is, if you are in certain places along, when you drag, you can actually drag away too much paint and thus leave the board exposed. So here I am just picking up a little bit of the leftover white that has dripped off and just touching it to that board to make sure that there's no raw board exposed, and making sure the sides are all covered as well, and just putting that tiny dots of white where I need to from my fingers. You'll see me just continually fiddling with it, the piece, just for a little bit, just to make sure that it's perfect. Didn't like that little bit sticking out there, so just tapped it over with the white. So I've lit my torch, and as you can see the cells starting to pop up, just small ones. I'm just running over gently with the torch over the colour to bring that little bit of lacing out in the colours. And also get rid of any air bubbles in my white on the background. Now I'm just going to move the piece gently, just tilting it very slightly I don't want it to move too much. Just a little bit here and there to get a good shape. This is the time you need to be really careful when you tilt. If you tilt too much, too fast, too quickly, any of that, you can completely destroy a piece. It takes very careful movement to try and control where you'd like everything to go. I noticed another little hole there, so I just touch that up with a tiny bit of paint runoff from the tray. Here I am dragging a skewer through the paint edge just to give the tiniest little wispy lines, because I drag from the colour into the white. It's hard to see on this bit of the video, but I will show that better in close-up pictures at the end of the video. I wasn't overly happy with how the paint was sitting in this top corner from where I started the drag, so I grabbed out a straw just to give the paint a little push and a little move. What I had discovered was it was quite thick in a couple of spots and not covering well in a couple of others, so by blowing the paint around I not only can control the patterning of it, but I can also distribute the paint more evenly. Which is what I'm trying to do here. Just giving it a little tiny blow here and there with the straw. Can't quite see the end of the straw because it's just outside view. But can you see the paint moving? Just at the edges there, just trying to push the paint out fractionally from where it is, give it a little bit more oomph to the edging of the pattern. Just helps create some extra detail in the piece. Just having a look and trying to decide if I need to do anything more, and to touch up those edges there, as you can see with my finger. I procrastinate a lot when I create these pieces. I like to take my time, I like to look over every little part of them, make sure I'm really happy with what I'm seeing, make sure that every little skerrick of the edge is completely covered with the same amount of paint, make sure that there's no little bubbles or defects in the surface of the paint. It's something I just continually go over and go over. You see there I had another little air bubble that I wanted to deal with, so I tapped with my finger and then blew with the straw again to make sure that that air bubble was completely popped. Like I said, just completely going over the piece to make sure that it's all perfect, or as perfect as I can get it, that's for sure. Just working on those edges again. I decide that I need to move the paint just a little here, again with the straw. Straw is a great way just to give a little slightly different patterning. If you want something moved just a little bit, it gives great effects. If you're just trying to move just a tiny bit. If I want to move paint a lot more than this, I usually grab out my airbrush, sorry. But when I'm just doing little touch-ups like this, I find the straw is more than adequate. And now I'm just having a good look over it, making sure I like what I see. I've seen another little bit where I need some more white paint. So again, just touching up that background and sides just to get it perfect. There's nothing worse than doing a piece and then finding out that your edges weren't perfectly covered, or you're missing something slightly, or something like that. Here I've decided that I wanted the paint to flow off the bottom portion here, so I wanted it to flow off the board, so I'm giving it a bit of tilt to let that paint just flow down slightly. And just making sure that the edges stay well covered with the white at the same time. You see how it's running over that edge just fractionally now? Just retouching those edges once more. Just letting that flow slightly more, with gentle tilting. And just trying to get that white surface perfect. Can you see how it's slightly dimpled and uneven in this section? That's what I'm working on, just trying to make sure that it's perfect. If there's the same amount of paint there, when I put it down to leave, I know that it'll be able to come out nice and flat. If I don't have the right amount of paint, I'll get leftover dimples and lumps, which I do not want in my finished piece. I'm just wiping away any excess paint off the underside of the piece, and that's pretty much it. Put her aside to dry, and I'll show you some images of the finished board. Hope you enjoyed it. Here's the finished board. Look at all those gorgeous shining primary elements shining away there. You can see small amounts of the copper through the piece if you look closely, as well as the greens and the blues, and I just love it. Hope you do too. Thank you very much for joining me here today, and thanks for watching. Bye now.